because we have a limited amount of time, we're going to try to get through the topics that we'd like to present and then leave some time for questions and answers, because there's certainly no way to cover this even in 3 hours or 4 hours. There's a lot to know, but what we hope today is a great introduction for you. And again, I am Tim Brunold. I am, as many of you in the room are, a longtime employee of the university. I have an undergraduate degree from USC. I have worked here at USC. I'm just starting my 20th year. I've worked most of that time in the undergraduate admission office, although I did work about 6 or 7 years in the engineering school many years ago. I am a parent as well. My son is not quite yet ready to go to high school, but I certainly want to acknowledge that this is a topic that's of interest really to all parents. And so I certainly come to the presentation today understanding sometimes that there's a sense of anxiety, understanding again that many of us have given many years of service to USC and are interested in having our children come here, or at least certainly go to college. So we're going to have Kirk introduce himself, and then we'll move on with the rest of the program.
Hi, I'm Kirk Brennan. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Admission. We serve bachelor-seeking students in my office. I connect with a lot of what Tim said because my daughter is 16, and I was counting on the terrific home equity market to pay for college. You know what I mean by that? You know that asset has lost a lot of strength in our family, and I share a lot of, I think, the anxieties that many parents do about paying for college and sending a kid to college. I'm also very pleased to spend a lunch hour with my colleagues. I know a lot of you from just working around campus or riding the bus back and forth, or just standing in line at lunch together, or just being here. But I want to express my solidarity with staff, and know that we're all in this together, and we're all trying to help families find the right way. So thanks for coming, and I hope that this is valuable for you, and if it's not, let me know.
Well, you know, one of the common themes that we always hear when we talk about admission is confusion. And I know that some of you are confused because I've spoken with many of you. And the fact is, whether you're a longtime staff member, a longtime faculty member, someone who yourself has gone to college, the fact is, unless you've gone through the college admission process really any time in the last 15 or so years, you're probably not as aware of what some of the realities are in college admission these days. And I know some of you, this child, your oldest child, might be the first person in your family to go to college. So I just want to acknowledge before we get started that there are a lot of different backgrounds in the room. Some people know a little bit more than others. But we know there's a lot of confusion. Many of you answered the survey that we sent around, and I'm so glad that you did that. How does anyone even get into college these days? You know, we've all heard how competitive it is. We've all heard how competitive certainly USC is. So we're going to try to answer some of those questions. Does my employment status at the university make a difference? Does it help? Does it hurt? You know, I've heard some people say, well, you know, of course the university doesn't want all these staff members getting the tuition benefits, so maybe there's some kind of a quota or some kind of a limit on the numbers of children of faculty and staff who are admitted. And I'll squash that one right now. There is not. So it does help. And I've got some data to back up that assertion. How does my child improve his or her chances? You know, that is certainly something that we're going to be talking some about. How am I going to pay for this? Can I afford to send my kid to college? Do only rich people send their children to USC? You know, a lot of us work with students directly, and we know there are a lot of students here who come from families with wealthy backgrounds and families where, you know, the idea of getting financial aid or the idea of paying for college is not something they've ever had to worry about. We're going to talk about all of that stuff today. Now, as I said before, we're not going to be able to get into great detail in many of these topics. And I want you to understand that this session is really the first in what we hope to be a series of sessions. We plan at some point over this next academic year to have a session specifically about paying for college and about using the tuition assistance benefit at USC. We also plan to have other ones of these sessions, maybe as many as 4 to 6 per year. So this is really just the start. There are actually about 3,000 faculty and staff currently working at the university who have at least one child who's either in junior high or high school. There are a lot of folks out there at the university that have an interest in this topic. So let's just jump right in. We're going to talk about some background information today. I'm going to sort of paint the landscape for you a little bit. I'm going to talk a bit about what it takes to prepare for college with a particular emphasis on USC, although not a complete emphasis on USC. The information that we're going to give you today is going to be helpful regardless of whether USC is a choice or other schools are choices. Then we're going to switch gears. Kirk's going to jump in. He'll talk about some resources that you might find very helpful. We're going to talk about USC's admission process, and then as we said, we promise to save some time for questions and answers at the end. A lot has happened in 20 years. A lot has happened at USC in 20 years, but a lot has happened in the college landscape in 20 years. What is this chart? Well, that purple line on the top, that's the number of freshman applications USC has received, starting in 1991, going all the way to this last year. What happened? What happened in here?
I started the admission. I was
Yeah.
here. I'm not saying
This year over here, aren't they? And there was a lot going on. I mean, many of you were around here at USC then. You know that 1991 is when President Sample came. Unfortunately, we had the riots in 92, and we had the earthquake in 94, and there were a lot of challenges that we had, not just in the admission office at USC, but all across USC. The green line is the number of students, number of freshmen who were admitted each year, and the red line is the number of freshmen who enrolled. So really what I want you to take away from this is that we have actually kept the number of freshmen at USC fairly constant. The number of admits has sort of shrunk a little bit, but the biggest difference and what is defining everything right now is that the demand is far outstripping the supply. The university doesn't have the capacity to grow its undergraduate student body. It's been creeping up a little bit, but the fact is we don't have enough housing spaces, we don't have enough dining spaces, enough parking spaces, enough faculty, enough classrooms to really grow the undergraduate student body. So we are not in a growth mode at USC. However, one thing that is in a growth mode is the applicant. Now nationally, what you also need to know is that starting in 1984, some of you remember 1984, a great publication called US News and World Report began ranking colleges. And although there have been many attempts to rank colleges and universities, what you will know if you're following the college admission field at all is that with those rankings in the mid-'80s and on, there's been a great deal of pressure put on colleges and universities to compete. So these days, more students are applying to more colleges, and colleges are competing with each other in ways that they never did before. Certainly in ways that were not true when most of us went to college. Now there's a lot of numbers on this chart, but what I just want the takeaway for you to see is that this is what has happened at USC in the admission process over the last 20 years in 5-year increments. So 20 years ago in 1991, 3 out of 4 freshmen that applied to USC were admitted. 3 out of 4, 73%. The average GPA was just about a 3.5. The average SAT, in those days, the SAT, the maximum SAT was a 1600. Some of you may still think that's the case. Actually, about 5 years ago now, the maximum SAT is 2400. There's 3 sections now. Everything's bigger and bolder now, I suppose. But in those days, the average SAT was at 1070, and that was in the 58th